Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. I recently came across this from ASEAN Now, that's ASEANnow.com. Articles titled, Thailand Detects First Case of Omicron Variant. Quoting directly, the case was discovered in a male U.S. citizen who had traveled to Thailand from Spain at the end of November. Quoting further, Dr. Supakit Sirilak, chief of Thailand's Medical Science Department, told press on Monday. Quoting further, Dr. Supakit urged the public not to panic in relation to the discovery of the Omicron variant in a person in Thailand. The reason I'm bringing this up and the reason for the title of this video, and I don't really mean to be snarky or sarcastic here, but I've seen and gotten correspondence from many people who are worried that there's going to be a mass reimposition of lockdown, and then there's some folks I've seen in the press that are sort of, really the only word I have for it is hysterical over this, and begging the question out there that should we lock down, Well, my response at this point, the way I kind of look at it, it's one man's opinion, however you want to take it, but if we're going to do that, first of all, I can't think of a more devastating economic decision than locking down again. And I have to be honest, just from what I've seen and people I've talked to that are in businesses here in Thailand, small, medium, folks that are working in large corporations, another major full-on lockdown, honestly, may bring economic activity to such a standstill that Thailand may never fully, well, I hesitate to use the word never say never, but it may be the end of this decade before Thailand sort of gets back to where it needs to be with respect to, economics. I mean, the definition of a depression, and, I'm not an economist by training, but I do read a lot on economics, and the definition of a depression, at least according to a guy I read rather frequently, a guy named Jim Rickards, also an attorney, but an economic analyst, he basically says that the definition of a depression is essentially economic activity operating below the potential of that economy. So, the 30s in the United States, for example, there were ups and downs. There was money being made. There was economic activity occurring, but it was happening at a threshold lower than what the economy could be, the output that the economy could be operating at or was operating at, sort of baseline operation prior to, in this case, for example, the 29 crash, which led into the economic quagmire that became the 1930s in the United States. Not to get too deep into that, but the reason for the video, and I'm just kind of hoping cooler heads prevail on this. Let's everybody just have a look back at how this has all evolved. To date, and I'm happy to be corrected in the comments, if you've got data that can show this, but to date, no one's been able to show me that lockdowns have effectively done much of anything. If anything, and I've done videos on this going back into April, and into May, stuff like this will get imposed and, the numbers go up regardless. And then you look at countries like, for example, Sweden, and it's tough to explain why that country, had the track record it did. I'll leave it at that. You can go out and look it up on your own without the need to impose quite the level of draconian restrictions that other jurisdictions did. Again, I don't know the answer to these questions, but what we do know unequivocally is the 3 lockdowns we've now gone through, the latest one being months, basically the latter half of 2021 for the vast majority, especially of small businesses. It's been devastating. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we've just seen the economics of lockdown. It's like nuclear winter for economics, for the economy. So we know that. What I fail to see, and I haven't seen any data that really shows that they've had a tremendous benefit. So when doing a cost-benefit analysis, I fail to see where that's at. And in the meantime, more than anything, if we were to see another lockdown now, I don't know. I just couldn't see a large number. I'm almost at a loss for words, but a large number of businesses I just don't think would recover. And it also begs the question as to whether people would feel confident about traveling to Thailand or anything in the future. Now, let's be clear, and they've said this in this article. This public, medical science department doctor, Dr. Supakit, urged the public not to panic. Great. I'm glad. It's good to see that urging not to panic in relation to the discovery of the Omicron variant in a person in Thailand. It's my understanding, and I'm a layperson when it comes to anything medical science related, frankly. It's my understanding from reports that I've read, including from public health officials in South Africa, for example, that this thing is not quite the threat that maybe some in the media out there are purporting it to be, or at least implying that it is. That being said, again, I don't know everything on this topic, but what I do know is another lockdown, and it also sort of begs the question: if we're going to just do this every time someone reports something about this, a lockdown every time it's in the press that this disease exists, people have it, they've contracted it, etc. At what point, where do we begin and where do we end? Does it ever end? Or are we going to go into lockdown forever? And quite frankly, and to sort of get back to the thrust of this video, honestly, the reopening and then the closure is the worst part for businesses. It's sort of the hope of being able, putting in the money, putting in the resources to get those businesses reopened, only then to be just squashed in lockdown shortly thereafter. That's the worst part of this. If it's just a prolonged lockdown and then it reopens and we move on, well, that is what it is. And people can argue if that was the right thing to do, etc. But it's behind you. But to have this continuously just open, shut, and to see these businesses, it's really been sad and difficult to watch some of these businesses, go through the motions, get things in place, get reopened, only to be open a couple of weeks in some cases. Going back in the first half of this year, I saw this quite a lot, only to be open literally for a matter of weeks, 4 or 6 weeks, and then to be locked up again. And in those, I just don't see in a lot of cases that this can go on much longer, if at all. I would actually argue it can't go on again. Now that said, one man's opinion, but I really am kind of concerned that there are folks out there that view this, don't seem to be able to sit down and do a cost-benefit analysis at this point, 2 years down the road, where we do know, what this thing is. Yes, there are some risks, but are those risks worth putting an entire economy completely on ice?